Welcome to They Live by Film, a platform dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. I'm Adam Lundy, and I am joined as always by my co-hosts Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant. Hello, guys.
Hello,
How's it going?
hello.
Hello. I'm not
How's
even
things?
gonna try an Australian accent. I'm just
Good
gonna
eye,
say hello.
mates. Good
I think
eye.
Man,
the only one I can do is you call that a spoon? This is a spoon. No, it's not. It's a
No, you did it wrong. You called it a
this is the
knife.
knife. No,
This
I
is a
see you played
knife.
knifey spoony before. I got it wrong. Thank you.
That's
There we go.
uh,
not a
I had
knife,
it
that's
mixed
a
up there.
spoon. I see you've played knifey
Knifey
spoony
spoony
before then.
before.
y'all are a good bunch of Sheilas.
Good,
Um,
good
And all
listen to this
four people
episode.
who listen to us from Australia have now logged out. So we're good
Yeah.
to make fun of them as much as we want to now. They're
Yes.
all gone.
Goodbye. Goodbye for
uh,
Australians.
man, I'm
Uh,
very much looking forward to this episode today. But before all that, I'm good, man. Thank you. How are y'all?
Excellent. Cannot complain. Living the dream.
Same.
It's fantasy football season now. Do y'all have teams?
Yep.
No, I've always had a adamant I will not play fantasy football because I've watched other people do it. And they stop like being fans of teams and they're just so obsessed with it. I was like, how do you enjoy football at this point? So
Oh
for me, it
man,
does not work. I can't do it.
My
I
team has
used.
had a terrible start. I'm 0-2.
Who's your quarterback?
I don't like to talk about it.
Oh, it's
Just
Josh
for
Allen. It's Josh Allen.
no, it's even worse. It's if
No, it's
only
the
it
guy from
was.
the Jets.
No, it's Kirk Cousins.
Oh, Kirk
Cousins had a pretty
Cousins.
good game last week, though. I mean,
He
they
did. That's
lost,
the
but he
problem
had
with
a good
Kirk.
game.
That's the problem with Kirk Cousins. You don't know which one's going to show up. So we have a two quarterback league. So my quarterbacks are Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr. Um,
Oh,
so yeah, I didn't.
Somebody should,
Yeah, all
whoever got Baker's probably doing pretty good.
yeah. That's the thing. Baker got taken like really late. Like all the good quarterbacks. I was not. It's a 10-man league, and I was ninth picking. Um, but it was a snake draft, so I got my first two picks like in quick succession. So like I got a good wide receiver and a good running back. But then by the time it got back around to me again, all the good quarterbacks were gone. So I'm like, fuck it. I'm just gambling on Kirk Cousins because my logic was Justin Jefferson's probably the best wide receiver in the league. So I'll pick the guy who's
Hmm.
throwing to him. That's my logic. It hasn't really worked out that way though. So
give
I
it,
feel
give him
bad
time.
for whoever picked Rodgers. God, I feel
oh
really.
yeah. Oh yeah.
He was on
He
my
got
bench.
a sack and a incompletion. What a year.
Or Rodgers, man. I know he's a bit of a weird dude, but he's a good
He is a
quarterback.
very weird dude.
Yeah, I've got Mahomes as quarterback, so that's
Oh
good.
well, laddie da
But
for some.
he hasn't warmed up yet. He hasn't had a great game yet. He's been doing well, but he hasn't had a vintage Mahomes games yet. So I'm 1-1. But anyways, what have y'all been watching?
I can go first. I only have one that I really want to talk about anyway. So recently, and it's also a great excuse for me to complain about Disney, which I always enjoy doing. So recently, I've watched a movie on Hulu called "No One Will Save You," and it joins the likes of The Empty Man, Prey, and Hellraiser for movies Disney has gotten, and they have unceremoniously thrown on streaming, even though they're good movies because they're horror movies. I guess I don't know. They've just had a habit of it, but really cool movie. Stars the girl. I don't know if either one of y'all watched Justified, but it stars one of the girls who played in Justified as this quiet girl who's went through some trauma, and it turns into a home invasion movie. And while I thought this was a spoiler when they announced it in the teaser, the home invader is an alien. So it ends up becoming a alien. I don't want to compare it to Signs, but in a sense, it has some Sign stuff. Like the alien is a lot more like traditionally like big eyes, gray, and that sounds like it could be boring, but they do so much like cool stuff with it and very creepy stuff. I'd actually say it's probably the best jump scare I've seen in quite a few years. They had a really well set up one, really interesting movie, and sadly, Disney is just unceremoniously saying, "Yeah, we'll just throw it on Hulu. Who cares?" Or Disney Plus, I guess, for you, Adam, if they even
What
have
what
it
was it
over there
called
yet.
again?
No one will save you.
No one will save you. I saw the poster for it. Yeah, I don't know if it's actually available here now, but I did remember seeing something. I saw the poster about it anyway. Um, but it was good, right? You said it was good.
Yeah, It's excellent. It really was.
Okay.
It's up there in probably my top 3 horror of the year. Though this has been kind of a down year for horror movies anyway, but it's still really good. I absolutely think it's worth watching. It's just I don't know what Disney's plan is like for horror because like even with those 4 I mentioned, then they had Barbarian, which they did put in theaters, but then didn't give a physical release to. So
Well, this is who you keep saying Disney, and I understand why, but who actually produced it? Was it
20th
Fox?
century,
Okay, yeah,
20th century, but yeah, I mean some of those were from the Fox acquisition, but this wasn't. This was under their label of 20th Century Studios.
interesting.
So yeah, I mean, the other ones, like, I mean, like they put Prey on Hulu, and it's like that movie should have been in theaters. I mean, it's a
Yeah, that
Predator
was really
movie,
good. It was so good as well. That
and
would
they
have
actually had
popped
a
as well.
Hellraiser with budget, and they also just threw it on Hulu. And Empty Man was one that I think got a couple theaters, but it was in the middle of COVID, and they just threw it on something. And they're all really good movies that could have gotten an actual like audience, but they said, "Oh well, we don't need to do that."
It's crazy not to put a Hellraiser reboot or, a Hellraiser movie in theaters.
I don't know would it get that many people into theaters though. Like I don't think Hellraiser is as big of a brand outside horror circles. It's not like it's not in the same echelon as, Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street. It's like it's loved by horror fans, but I don't know if like I just don't think it would have made a lot of money, to be honest.
I think even if it doesn't necessarily make money at theaters, I think the advantage is that it may help curb the idea that Hellraiser is a direct-to-video horror franchise when they still
Mm.
just perpetuate that, even though they had David Bruckner come in and make the movie and put a lot of work into it. I know a lot of people don't like it, some people do, but there's a lot of work put into it to revamp it. And I think it could have at least opened people back up to Hellraiser because most people have only seen, like you said, beyond the horror fans, or maybe the first one, maybe the second one,
Yeah,
and
I've
that'd
only
be
seen the
about it.
first two, so
Yeah, I mean that's where a lot of people are told to stop watching is the first 2.
Well, y'all already know my opinion on it. I think it's way underrated. Um, I actually haven't seen this new one yet because I'm trying to go in order, and the next one up for me is the one I'm dreading the most. It's the one they just kind of threw together in 2 weeks. Judgment, I think.
The one where like, hey, we need the rights, so just throw out a movie that's called Hellraiser real quick.
Yeah, no, totally. So I'm not looking forward to that. But I think after that one, it's all reboots. So I think they're better, is what I understand. So
Yeah, I mean, I can vouch for. I haven't seen a lot of them in a while, but I can vouch for the 2022 one. I think it's very good. They had I forgot the girl who played Pinhead in this one. I can't Jamie something. I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but she's really good as Pinhead.
it's such a creative idea for a franchise. Um, you know, this whole idea of like some world that exists that gives you pain and pleasure, and like all the people that seek out a world like this, and I don't know. It's a very dark and interesting just idea in general, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of times I do think they like do well with like what they have and what they can do with it, and like it's how ambitious it can be. But it's also sometimes like Nightmare on Elm Street, where you have so much playground to run through
Yeah.
that they don't do anything with it.
Mm.
They're just like, no, nah, we're going to keep it kind of boring, even though we can do anything in this film.
We can we can do a Hellraiser cast one year for Halloween for our October special, because I've got a lot of good things to say about those movies. But yeah, I generally know what you mean. Um, and I know we're not doing that today.
So, what about you guys? What are y'all watching?
I'll be
I,
really go
I
ahead,
was gonna
Adam.
say I'll be quick as well. So yeah, if you want to go.
Well, yeah, I just really want to call out. I mean, I've been watching a lot of stuff, but I really want to call out With Nail and I and How to Get Ahead in Advertising. These two Bruce Robinson movies from the 80s. Do you,
I've heard of them, but I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
Yeah, I'm the same. I know of them, but I've never seen either.
I might even bring them into the podcast one day. They are these like, I don't even know how to describe them. They're just very cynical, dark comedies. With Nail and I's mm, probably almost like kind of like an art house comedy, I would say. Um, And then How to Get Ahead in Advertising is like a cross between Brain Damage and some sort of a stage comedy, like a comedy that would typically be on a stage. But it's this guy that grows a boil, and that boil starts to grow a face and talk to him, and then the boil takes over and becomes the main head.
It's almost
Um,
like Basket Case.
yeah, yeah, that's a great example.
Family Guy did it as well.
Yeah, I'm sure I would guess Family Guy would base it off of this. It's a pretty famous, or relatively famous, kind of story or whatever. But yeah, anyways, they're awesome. They're awesome. Especially, I like them both. I think I like With Nail, and I don't know. I think How to Get Ahead in Advertising is just so funny and so good. I think I like it better, but With Nail is very good as well. So I don't even know where you find them. They're out of print DVDs. They're not With Nail is streaming. So I guess you could find it on the Criterion channel. That's exactly where you could find it.
Wait until Severin releases them like they did Overboard. It seems like they're overboard. Like we need, we could do something like that.
Yeah, it it would be that would be awesome. Do you know have you ever heard of this Bruce Robinson guy?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, How to Get Ahead in Advertising is also streaming on Criterion channel. So that's
Okay,
I,
great.
so it must
I
must
wouldn't
be
have
their
known
October.
him. I wouldn't have known his name, but like I'm looking at his filmography here, and like I've heard of movies on his filmography. So yeah,
Yeah, it makes me really want to see more from him. He's just the humor is so like sardonic. I don't even know how else to really say it. It's just really good stuff.
I'm
So
surprised, Zach, that you've never seen The Rum Diary. It seems like a film you would have seen.
Is that the deaf one?
Johnny Depp, yeah, where he's playing Hunter S. Thompson. The other
I
one
have
where he's
seen
playing
it. It's
Hunter
just
S.
been a
Thompson.
long time.
Yeah, well, that's the same director. So
Okay, then yeah, I've seen that.
well, there you go.
mhm. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, mine's super quick. I haven't watched a ton. Because yeah, I just haven't watched a ton recently. I watched a really good documentary last week. I don't know if you guys are into Formula One at all or anything like that, but there was a good documentary that came out back in 2010 about Ayrton Senna, the Brazilian Formula One driver who died during a race. It's a really, really good documentary. It was just kind of crazy just watching how unsafe those cars were back in like the 80s and the 90s, before they brought in all the stuff to kind of protect the drivers. But it was really interesting. I thought it was a well-made documentary. I did not have a fun time in the Criterion Film Club for the last week either, between Limit and Ghost in the Shell. Didn't have fun watching those, unfortunately. And then it
But
was
now you
Neve's
get to watch a
turn.
3-hour documentary on a
I'm not
heroin
watching it.
addict.
I just refuse. I'm just not going to watch it, to be honest. It's as simple as that. Um, and then on Friday, Neve chose the movie. I had originally chosen the movie. Just I'll save this part till afterwards because it's kind of funny and kind of leads into what we're talking about. But eventually Neve chose the movie and she chose Rain Man, and I'd never seen Rain Man, funnily enough. I knew what it was about and stuff, and I'd heard of it and everything, but I'd never actually seen it. I thought it was pretty good. Um, both Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman were good. Just kind of enjoyable. 2 hour
Coppola directed that,
experience.
right? I'm
So
not insane, am I?
no, don't think.
It's
No,
not
it wasn't
Coppola.
Coppola. I'd never heard
No,
of the
what is
guy who
that?
directed it.
What is that legal
Barry
drama he did?
Barry Levinson is the guy who made this film anyway. Um,
I'm getting it mixed up
Uh,
with a Coppola movie where he did a legal drama. Is that the one with Matt Damon in it? I don't know. It's not important. I just thought it was that one. You could go on.
yeah. But the film that I had chosen to watch, Talk to Me, just came out on digital here. So I was like, oh cool, let's watch Talk to Me. It got really good reviews and stuff like that. I've been interested to see it. And it's funny because we're going to be talking about some Australian movies. I didn't realize that Talk to Me was Australian. Um,
mm-hmm.
because I'd only seen a brief trailer for it and I didn't realize it. And it's funny because we watched these Australian movies this week for the pot for this episode. I generally just don't like watching stuff in Australian or in Australia because their accents just kind of low key annoy me. So and Neve is the exact same. So when we turned on the film and they started talking and we heard their accents, we were like, no, we're not watching this. So we turned it off after like 2 minutes.
What?
Yeah.
So you didn't finish it?
No, we watched 2 minutes of it, heard they were talking in Australian accents and said, fuck this, I'm not watching this movie.
You guys are like
So
closet racist. That's hilarious.
no, it's not racist. It's just the accents are it's hard. I just can't take horror movies seriously when it's in an Australian accent. It's the same with the Bab. I've never seen the Babadook because again, I got 2 minutes in, heard the Australian accent, I said, no, I'm not going to be able to take this seriously, and turned it off. So I've never seen the Babadook, never seen Wolf Creek.
Wolf Creek is so good.
Didn't
Wolf
watch
Creek is
Talk
so
to Me, probably won't watch. I might eventually force myself to watch it. Getting Neve to watch it might be another story. So it was just funny that I was forced to watch 2 Australian movies
Well,
this week.
for what it's worth, I was chatting with somebody who lives in Adelaide where it was filmed, and they said it's a very very good representation of the Adelaide scene. So and it's the same producers as Babadook actually. So funny you mentioned
Oh,
that.
Yeah, it was distributed there. I think they were both distributed by A24 as well, so makes sense.
and I
Yeah,
want to note, I'm not a complete idiot. It is The Rainmaker. I just wanted to know that. That's what Coppola
Rain
directed.
Man,
So I'm not
Rainmaker.
stupid. I just got it mixed up.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
it has rain in the title.
Yeah, so I was
Um,
like, oh yeah, that's
And
that one,
May
right?
as Rain and then MA. So
that's true. Yeah, you get very close actually.
very close.
Well, Adam, I won't shame you for being racist, but Talk to Me is pretty good, man. I just saw it recently. It's pretty good.
I'm sure
Yeah,
it's
I like
great.
Talk to Me.
I've only heard positive things about it. I'm sure it's really good. Whether or not I'll be able to get past the Australian accents is just another question
It's
altogether.
hilarious. Like
Yeah, it's a weird one.
it's like two groups with accents like fighting with each other. It's like, no, your accent is worse.
Yeah. I just don't
But
think I'll be able to take
I
it
know not
I
from your
just
perspective.
yeah, I just don't think I'll be able to take horror seriously in an Australian accent. I don't know.
Now, just to join you and your we all have some racism in us. I'm the same way with South African accents. If like, I saw who's that guy? Neil Blomkamp or
Yeah,
whatever.
Camp. Yeah.
I've seen his movies and I like them for the most part. I like District 9 a lot. But if I have a choice, I would rather not watch something with South African accent. So I
Well,
kind
I'm
of
the only one
understand
here
where
not racist, I guess. Just kidding. I hate the French.
that's true, you do. Yeah.
Let's move
We're
swiftly
just
along before we get cancelled by 3 different countries, please. So, Chris, do you want to introduce the group, what we're going to be talking about this week?
boy, do I. Okay. So I pared this down to about an hour intro. But no, I'm just kidding.
What?
What? No, just kidding. Okay, so 70s, 1971 in Australia is an important year because they introduced an R rating. And on the back end of that, there is a sub-industry that was born in Australian filmmaking that was genre films, exploitation films, and over time it got to be known as Ozploitation. That, just like anything, there was no formal movement, right? It just kind of happened because now all of a sudden producers could make lower budget movies and have salacious content in them, and it would sell well. The first big one to hit, if I think this is right, there was a bunch of them that were made, some of them that got some international acclaim, but then Patrick came along and just sort of was this huge hit on the drive-in circuits and got distributed all over the world. And then obviously Mad Max was in that, right? And so all of a sudden, these Ozploitation movies really took over. And there's a guy who was born in England, classically educated, and kind of an intellectual, honestly, who liked making movies with what he called blood and mayhem. And he got some notoriety with a movie called The Man from Hong Kong. One second. Yeah, he got some notoriety with a movie called The Man from Hong Kong, which is a co-production between Australia and Hong Kong. I haven't seen it yet, but supposedly it's pretty good. And his name was Brian Trenchard-Smith. And some producers got a hold of him. They had made a sex comedy that was extremely popular. The guy on the interview on the disc for the first movie we're going to see called Turkey Shoot, the producer was on there and he was talking about some of the sex comedies they made that made them millions of dollars on a tiny budget. So all of a sudden they had money to play with. And he teamed up with Brian Trenchard-Smith, who had these kind of big ideas and was really felt like he really understood the genre. So they made a couple movies together. And then Trenchard-Smith has an interesting career because he's now in the US. So he's born and kind of raised in the UK, although he's Australian. Lived for a long time in Australia, worked in Australia, and then ended up marrying an American and working in Hollywood. Funny guy, really funny guy. I listened to one of his commentaries for this, and I listened to another interview of his. Super interesting dude. He's kind of a intellectual in the way that Corman is, where it catches you off guard, because they're talking about movies with just a lot of TNA and heads exploding, but they're doing it in a very thoughtful way. So I'm a huge fan of Trenchard-Smith in general. He reminds me a little bit, I want to see if y'all agree with this as we go along. He reminds me a little bit of an Australian Jim Wynorski, in that he's fully in on the joke. And I think that's obvious when he comes to Hollywood. He's producing Leprechaun 4, Night of the Demons 2. Like he knows what he's doing. I mean, not producing, directing. So he knows what he's doing. And he's just kind of having fun. And so I don't know if we need any other intro into that other than to say, if you like these, and I'll introduce the movies here in just a second. If you like these, definitely there's a Wikipedia page with Ozploitation, OZ Ozploitation titles. I would recommend going there and sort of seeing what else is on the list. There are some fantastic movies there. And Brian Trenchard-Smith also has some gems in his oeuvre, as it were. But today we're going to be talking about two of his to kind of get people in the mindset of things that are not Mad Max. One of the first, I think we'll just go chronologically, right? So one of them is called Turkey Shoot, and it was released in the US as Escape 2000. And then the second one is called Dead End Drive-In, which had about 3 times the budget. So you kind of watch, this is a good chance to watch his career, what he can do on a teeny budget and then on a medium-sized budget. So yeah, I think that's it as far as way of intro. There's a lot more I'd like to say on the guy, but I'm trying to keep it tight. For Turkey Shoot, let's start. Adam, you're always and Zach, y'all are always so kind to start with me. So Adam, what did you think of Turkey Shoot?
So Turkey Shoot, for me is like a film of two halves. I didn't really vibe too much with the first half, where they kind of end up in the camp and it's just showing like the life in the camp and stuff like that. I wasn't really getting it. I wasn't really too keen on it. I just thought it was, just kind of bland, low budget schlock. And then the second half of the movie I liked a lot better. When the actual sort of, whatever we call it, there's an American film where this is basically the plot. What's it called? The Most Dangerous Game or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. When the Most Dangerous Game plot starts,
Yep.
I started enjoying the film a little bit more. Got a lot more fun. Definitely a lot weirder with like certain characters that are introduced. The action's pretty good. I think the way the characters kind of interact with each other and the way the filmmakers kind of give kind of each of the characters, time to kind of breathe and to shine with how they're sort of dealing with this scenario is pretty good. Yeah, I didn't love it. I liked the next one we're going to talk about a good deal more. I think the first 40 odd minutes just kind of made it a little bit of a slog to get through, but once the main plot kicks in, I had fun. I think it's kind of the best thing I can say, really.
That's great. I think that satisfies his goal, I think. Zach, what about you?
I was all in the second the Wolfman showed up, and I was pretty good.
Yes, I figured that
Uh,
would be the case.
yeah, like I mean, it's definitely it's an interesting world, and like one of the things I kind of worried about going into it, like I didn't know Turkey Shoot was like a futuristic dystopian type film. So when I heard that, because I mean, if you like the cover, I think Severin put it out. Their cover,
Yep.
I don't think suggests that at all. I think it just
hmm
looks like almost something like Gator Bait or something like that.
hmm
So I was like, oh, I was like, this is gonna look like absolute garbage because it's like, but I credit to them. I should, because Mad Max is in the same thing where it's in a pre-apocalyptic world, like right before the world falls, and they do well with it. Like, I mean, of course, that's George Miller. George Miller, I think, is on a different tier when you talk about like exploitation directors who
Sure,
obviously
sure.
made his way to the mainstream. But it's kind of the same thing here. Like, I think it's a believable enough world that this is dystopian, even on like a limited budget that they obviously have. Because I think when I was doing a little reading on this, their budget got cut from like 3 point something million to 1 point something million, like very quickly. And there's like talks that the money was gambled away, and that's why producers didn't have it anymore, and they had to like shoot it on a much smaller budget. But I think they use it well. Like, I mean, there's good explosion effects towards the end and stuff like that. So it's definitely a movie that played well with the money it had.
Well, that's a huge part of the special feature, actually. So they have two of the producers on there with Brian in three chairs, and they're just sitting around, and they talk about how so they had this little production studio that made some money because of the sex comedy. And I keep saying that because I forgot the name. I'll look it up here in just a second. But um, uh, and they'd raised your 1.1 or whatever it was. They were going to front it, and from experience, they knew that they were shooting in. This one was shot in Melbourne, so whatever the state is, the Australian state that's associated with Melbourne, they anticipated they could go get money from them from the film commission. But the film commission that's where the gambling stuff had come in. There had been some unsavory activity. Somebody had been fired from the board from that fund, I guess, at the state level, and they just didn't have the money available. So a couple of weeks before shooting, when they had done all this pre-production and planning and hiring and all this stuff, he had to figure out how to make the same movie with $700,000 less. Um, and so they were praising him. They're praising Brian for being able to be flexible and sticking with the project and kind of making a movie that was slightly different that he had anticipated making.
Yeah, and I think that is a good mark of a good director, like regardless of like what the movie seemed like or if they appeal to everyone. Like losing over half your budget
hmm
is an impossible situation for most people. But if you sit there and you can like look at what you have and say, well, this can go, this can go, this can go, and still make a pretty easy to follow film, because I mean a lot of times what'll happen is movies will be made like that and then they just cut out scenes that are necessary and you're like, I have no idea what's going on. I at least knew
Totally,
everything that was going on in this film as it went on.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's funny.
it is easy to follow, luckily.
Good, good. Well, then, I mean, then it does what it's supposed to do as a genre film, right? Funny enough, this is his highest rated film on They Shoot Pictures, which,
It's surprising.
yeah, I agree. I think the movie is fun as hell, but I don't think I would say it's better than Dead End Drive-In. Just, I mean, like, on kind of all measures, right?
Mm.
Um, but I had a lot of fun with this movie. It's currently ranked 8,800. The only reason I want to kind of draw attention to this is because every time I see this, it makes me cry. It's one list, or it's one sort of rung above Female Prisoner 701 Scorpion,
Is it really
which
that low?
it just makes me cry, Zach. Like that's borderline a top 1,000 movie for me. I mean, if it's my list, it is 100%. But I think in general, that movie is so good.
Yeah, like honestly, I'm just surprised that's that low. Like Turkey Shoot, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, top
Right,
10,000, that's cool. Yeah.
right.
And then it's like, oh, that should be way up higher. And I felt like because I was assuming Turkey Shoot's higher than a lot of his, because I feel like it's one of the most well known he's done, or at least the most accessible, like where you can find it. Like even when I was looking for movies today, this one seems to always be streaming every time,
Yeah,
everywhere. Dead End Drive-In does not.
no. And this one even has a remake, which I wasn't able to find. I don't think it's
There's a
streaming in the
remake.
US. Yeah, 2014 Turkey Shoot with the same plot.
I'm
He
looking
was
it
the.
up.
I remember reading this. He was the. I'm pretty sure the guy, the director, was one of the producers of it as well.
Elimination Game with Dominic Parcell. That's interesting. I don't know anyone else in this movie besides him.
One thing I'm curious about, Chris, which is something you normally bring to the table for these conversations, and it's just kind of about context, because obviously both of these films kind of deal with a world where there's been economic collapse, and we're kind of seeing how the world is getting on after this kind of societal economic collapse happens. But like, he wasn't the only filmmaker doing this, especially in Australia. Obviously, the Mad Max films are happening as well, who kind of have similar plot threads.
Sure, sure.
Do you know, was there like some kind of context from a society point of view? I know it's like the 70s and the 80s. Obviously, there was like recession and stuff. Um, and I thought it was
Yeah,
interesting that the camp leader's surname was called Thatcher. And I was wondering if that was maybe interconnected as well. I know obviously this is an Australian movie and Thatcher was Prime Minister of England, but knowing that the director was English,
yeah.
maybe that tied in too.
So he specifically calls out that he did that just as a joke because he wanted people to associate Thatcher with a fascist.
Good, yeah, perfect. That's exactly what she was. So that's good.
And so he specifically made that camp director the Thatcher. No, I think the cultural context is much more relevant for the next one, for Dead End Drive-In.
Okay,
What he says about this is he like in his life over his career, he likes to make what if movies.
right.
And
Okay.
and this was just a fun kind of fantasy. And there's um the, you could point to any society, I think, and talk about the fear of moving towards this kind of, population control and some of the stuff that's going on here, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was necessarily as closely tied to what was going on in the news or anything as much as Dead End Drive-In,
Okay.
from
I
what I
suppose there was,
understand.
yeah, I suppose when I think about it, there was a lot of sci-fi films that kind of deal with this world moving on kind of thing. I suppose even like, what was the name of Bruno Mattei movies, kind of,
Yeah,
especially the one with the rats
yeah,
had this, was it the rats one? Yeah, the rats one.
yeah, for
Even
sure.
like even like Planet of the Apes and stuff like that, I guess, is kind of similar
Totally.
thread. Yeah.
Yeah, Logan's Run. I mean, there's so many of these
Logan's
coming out.
Run, yes, that was the one I couldn't think of in my head. Logan's Run, exactly. Yeah.
70s, right? And this was in 82, but still, like, it's kind of in that. I think the one interesting thing I wanted to call out on this is he says, he starts off the interview by saying, it's that there's an important distinction for a director. So you're either responsible for content or form, but not necessarily always both. And he said, I was responsible for form more in Turkey Shoot. Because if you look even at the writers, it has a couple of writers, and it's based off a short story or a novel or a story outside of this. And so he was brought in to direct a movie. He did not create this,
It's so interesting.
um, where he's much more hands-on with Dead End Drive-In. But he's funny. He's just an interesting guy. Like he put certain shots in there, and he was like, "Yeah, I hope that this would make some people call me to direct music videos." I put this shot in there so people would call me to direct music videos, but I never got the call. Um,
That's such that's just so interesting though about the content and the form thing, that because obviously a lot of the films we talk about, especially a lot of the classic films we talk about, or we always talk about auteurs,
mhm, mhm,
and these
mhm.
guys be sort of writing and directing, and it's kind of like a wholesale package that they're creating. Whereas this guy's totally self-aware that he didn't write this; he's just there to kind of take what was on the paper and just make it something that's watchable. And that's a really cool way of looking at things. I never really considered that that mindset of a filmmaker, that he wasn't like, obviously a lot of times when we talk about maybe commercial directors who, they're not writing their pictures, they're just outside hires and they're brought in to just kind of just direct the film.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of time it's just a paycheck, really. You're just there. You didn't write it. You don't really care too much. You're just there to make sure the things that are on the page get put onto the screen in a cohesive manner. You get your paycheck and then you walk away.
Yeah.
Whereas it sounds like even though he wasn't the writer, he was still invested on how, how the sort of final form was going to look, if that makes sense.
100% is. Yeah. It's one thing I like about him. He even talks about over and over again, he talks about how he just wants to do projects where he has fun and he wants his projects to be fun. So he's a very, I don't know, I'm a big fan of this guy.
Yeah, sounds like a cool guy.
Yeah. Steve Railsbeck, I don't know if y'all caught this, but he's the same guy that played Manson, the main character here. He's the same guy that played Manson in that old Helter Skelter movie. Have y'all seen that?
No, I haven't.
No, wait, you saying the main guy?
Mm-hmm.
You talking about the TV thing? No, that was unless we're thinking of different ones. The one in Helter Skelter was Jeremy Davies.
No, it's 1976. It's not a
Oh,
TV
okay, they have
movie.
two that are called that. Okay.
Well, I think it is a TV movie as well. I guess I didn't realize it was a TV movie, but no,
Don't
it
you?
was.
Zach will know anyone who was in a Lost TV show. He knows exactly all the movies and TV movies they were in. So
Totally.
It's a sad like talent, to be honest. But now I'm kind of what year did you say it was? I'm kind of curious now.
76.
1976.
Yeah, he's a Texan dude. He's
Oh
really
yeah.
American.
I've never heard of this. I might have to watch it. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, but I like Railsbeck a lot. If you look through his career, he has a lot of genre movies. And then I was trying to figure out where I knew Olivia Hussey from because where
Black
you see,
Christmas.
Black
yeah, I
Christmas,
saw,
yeah.
but she was, yeah, Black Christmas is the one where, as an adult, but then I remembered she was the one who has that really awkward scene in as a 15-year-old in the Romeo and Juliet movie.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And
That's
it's
getting a
just,
lot of controversy recently, yeah.
well, I mean, kind of rightfully so. Like,
Oh
that's
yeah,
one of
for
those,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, that's one of those movies that I saw even in middle school, I think, or maybe high school. But like, it was because it was Shakespeare, people rolled it out as like, it's okay to watch this, but it's a little weird. Like, if, like, you didn't need her to be naked in that to tell the story.
No, there's a lot of weird stuff. Even like all the stuff that Brooke Shields had to do when she was underage. She was
Yeah,
in a few movies where she was like nude when she was like 16. It's really
yeah,
weird.
yeah, yeah. So there's the 60s and 70s had a couple like that. There's people that made their career off that. So anyways, that's obviously not something we agree with on They Live by Film. Um, but Olivia Hussey was awesome in this. I thought she's a great. I thought she was fantastic in this role. I really liked her as a
She
kind
was
of
good. She
a.
must be Australian then. I'm surprised that she was like in it when, you know, obviously for Black Christmas it was an American film, so I just assumed she was American. But is she Australian? I never actually checked.
British.
British. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. And I mean Black Christmas is Canadian actually.
Oh, okay. Well, there we
Yeah.
go.
So she's moved everywhere.
Good for her.
Yeah, she's the daughter of I'm just reading. I didn't know this, but she's the daughter of an opera singer.
And
But
she
she
was
grew up.
born in Argentina.
Yeah, that's cool.
Why do you guys know so many fucking Olivia Hussey facts? Do you have our Wikipedia
No,
open?
I'm looking it up. I do not
Oh,
just know
okay.
this.
Thank
The
God.
Argentina one, I knew. I did not
I
know.
felt so unprepared for this episode. You guys are
No, I just
ringing
happened to be
off
looking
Olivia
at her
Hussey
Wikipedia.
facts.
Yeah, same. Just first paragraph in Wikipedia.
Okay, I feel less bad now.
Um,
I suppose we would talk about the Wolfman, right?
well, before we do, can we lead into that really quick? So just in case
Yeah.
people are curious if they're going to watch this or not. So this is the other thing that I forgot to mention that Trenchard-Smith is kind of famous for is kind of smashing genres together, right? So he likes to kind of mix stories together. So this one starts off almost like a 1984 type of movie, or like one of these where there's like a centralized control and people getting their rights taken away and they're put into camp, like, right? It kind of starts off in that type of world. Um, and they are there's a group of them that are taken to this um camp, I guess, right? And then they 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 come to they're given an opportunity to get their freedom if they participate in a game where they're hunted, right? And so then as the movie goes on, so it becomes this story where people are being kind of huddled up and thrown into this camp, and then you see their freedom. So then it becomes a chance to escape, and there's a couple twists at the end about how difficult it is for them to escape. Um, but that's kind of the general. It's a pretty simple premise, really, right? If you get through all the fluff, it's a fairly straightforward. Like they're trapped. The people who are, the captors are telling them they have a chance to escape if they can play this game and come out on top. And there's basically the odds are against them. There's no way they can come out on top, right? That's pretty much the premise to the movie, right? That's it's pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
Anything else? I mean, just I'm trying to think of like as far as people are curious what's going on. That's pretty
Oh.
much the whole thing, right?
Yeah, it's the most dangerous game, but like with Australian accents.
And if you want to hear
Simple.
Jason Statham do it, just watch the remake of Death Proof.
Yeah, it's kind of just
Not
one of
Death
these
Proof, Death
plots.
Race. Sorry.
Yeah, like
Okay.
it's one of these it's one of these plots that like just kind of get brought and sort of redone in different ways. Like one could argue is the Hunger Games and Battle Royale, and they all do something similar. Really, it's just kind of trying to survive against the odds. A bunch of normal people surviving against the odds. Really, it's one of those plots that you kind of see crop up, and it's been also been like homage and stuff by countless shows and movies and stuff along the way. Like American Dad has an episode that's very similar as well. That's obviously more riffing on the Most Dangerous Game, than anything else. But like, yeah,
Perfect.
it's pretty standard plot, but it's fun though. It's still fun.
And so that's the thing, right? When you get into a standard plot, you can start to kind of play with it a little bit, which is one thing I think I love how he
Yeah,
does.
for sure.
So then we can get into what you wanted to talk. I just wanted to kind of set the background a little bit. So one of the interesting characters early on is this hirsute gentleman that's introduced um, with with a lot of body hair and possibly somewhat lower intelligence. Is he given a name?
I don't know if he is. Oh, he is. He definitely is. What was his name? Because I remember the guy who's with him does refer to him as a name. What was it?
I feel like it starts with a P. I don't know why, but that's what it's coming to.
I feel like it's like a really like a normal name.
Oh,
uh,
Alf. Alf.
Oh, then
Alf.
I was
That
way
was
off.
it. Yes,
Yeah,
Alf. But it has
yeah.
Alf does have a P, so there you go. Once again, you're in the right ballpark, Zach. Um, yeah, he's really it's a really weird character. Like I I didn't like the introduction of Alf at first. I was like, this is so dumb. Why are they bringing this Wolfman thing into this film? It's already kind of weird. I don't think it needs to go this direction. But then I just kind of rode with it and it was fine. But yeah, definitely a weird character. I don't know if you guys have seen there's like this series of like British comedy movies called the Carry On movies. I don't know if you guys
Yeah,
have heard of those or
sure.
seen them, but they have a horror one called Carry On Screaming, and there's a character in Carry On Screaming that reminds me of Alf. I can't remember what the character's name is, but if you've ever seen that film Carry On Screaming, or if anyone who's listening has seen Carry On Screaming, they probably know exactly what I'm talking about with this character. So I feel like it's maybe a reference to that and even like Hammer and stuff in general. Because it's just a very odd creation. This sort of Wolfman elf character. It just doesn't seem to fit with the rest of the film. Like the film never really dipped its toe in like horror at all. It's like you're saying, Chris, it having this kind of blanketed plot set in the near future, it does give possibilities of filmmakers to experiment with other things.
Yeah.
Like there's no hint at all that like there's been any horror elements or anything to do with like genetic manipulation or anything like that prior to this. There's like no mention of anything that would lead to a Wolfman thing existing in this universe. And then they're just like, yeah, this is Alf, he's a Wolfman. And the audience is like, okay, cool. Thanks. That sounds fun. So it was jarring at first, but then I just kind of I just rode with it.
Yeah. It's probably the best thing to do in a Trenchard-Smith movie is just to roll with it. Because he throws a lot of stuff out. Um, I I don't know. I'm a sucker for this kind of stuff though. Like anytime somebody makes a bold choice with the character like this, I'm kind of drawn in. I don't know. What do you think, Zach? I have to imagine that. Oh, you even said it early on. This is the thing that hooked you in, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's just like, when you're talking about, like we were talking about earlier, that there's like so many movies that do this premise, whether, we've named a bunch. You got to do something to give it like a little bit of personality. Like maybe this is kind of a cheap way to give it personality. Maybe that's arguable, but it still makes it stand out regardless if that's kind of a cheap tactic or not. And I mean, it makes me more interested in what's going on. Because when you're getting into the, oh, okay, we're going to do this. I've seen this before, and it's like, oh, well, this is kind of a weird, quirky thing. That's kind of cool. So,
Mm.
I mean, it drawed me in, but I did end up liking the movie overall, and I think I would have still without it. But I don't know, it makes it more memorable.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing with exploitation movies, right? Like how do you stand out in a drive-in crowd, right? Or how do you stand out as a B picture? Or how do you stand out as a direct-to-video thing? Like you always have to think, you always have to be creative and really kind of push what people are expecting.
And I'd be
The
curious to see if he's on like the poster because, like, that was a thing when you talk about like B movies. Sometimes the poster is what attracted people to stay after the first feature.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
you create that, just say, well, that's something weird to put on the poster that'll draw people's attention.
I'm just funny you say that. I'm looking up the posters now, and I'm pretty sure he is. I'm pretty sure that's him on it. There's like a few characters that are on the poster, the main one anyway. And there's one that looks like him, but he's also holding a gun, which is something that his character doesn't do. But it's not like he's not like front and center. He's not like done up like a big sort of selling point of this movie, like you would expect. It looks like there is a poster where he is pretty much front and center on it. I'm just looking through like a bunch of posters for this film. There is a couple where he is featured quite heavily, on the poster. The original one that's on like the IMDb page, which it looks like Severin used for their artwork as well, because there's a little Severin logo in the bottom corner. He doesn't
Mm,
feature heavily there, but I'm looking at some other posters and he does feature quite heavily in other ones.
they knew what they had.
Yeah, they knew. Which you have to have a unique selling point, as Zach said rightfully. You have to stand out from the crowd. Like how many other B pictures were coming out at this time with very similar kind of plots. You have to have something that made you stand out a little bit. So it makes complete sense to me, to be honest.
Yeah. I also really liked Roger Ward in this, the giant guard.
Yeah, I was so certain that he was the guy in Indiana Jones that got caught by that got done in by the propeller, and it wasn't him. But I was so certain it was him and I had to eventually pause the movie to look it up,
Uh-huh.
because I thought for certain that he was the guy in Indiana Jones, that gets done in by the propeller, but it wasn't him. But he was good. He was very good in this.
Are we talking about the
He's
Thatcher dude, the big like general looking guy? Or somebody?
not.
No, no, Thatcher is the gray haired guy. We're talking about the big bald guy with the
Yeah,
mustache.
that the guy who's in the first Mad Max movie is his boss. Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
Ah, okay, cool, cool.
I only
I've
remember
never
that
seen
because
any
in that
original
he's
Mad.
shirtless, but he's wearing a tie. Like
Okay,
that's his whole character to me.
nice.
Um, yeah, he's awesome in this. I think he is an Australian guy. He was in Mad Dog Morgan too, if y'all have seen that. But he's in a bunch of Australian stuff. Um, he's kind of a mainstay there. But yeah, I think he's great in this. Um, like this is my favorite thing about genre pictures. Like you kind of need just a few things to be right for them to work, right? If you're gonna have villains, you need them to feel like they're villains, and to be threatening. So I think they do a good job between the Wolfman and then this guy who's just a giant.
Yeah, and,
I
and
liked
as
it.
much as I don't like this, like the first kind of half of the movie, they do a good job to like instantly make these people detestable.
Yeah,
All the wardens and stuff, like they like instantly you're like, these guys are fucking evil arseholes, and
yeah.
I don't care what happens to them for the rest of this movie. So as much as I didn't really care that much about the first half, they do a good job to really make sure you know that these guys are villains and they are not redeemable at all.
Absolutely. It reminds me a little bit of the way they set up Riccio. I don't know if the last time y'all have seen that, but when he gets into his prison, you spend a little bit of time getting to know the guards. They do a good job of setting up how evil they are. So it's just like it's like you have like, that old thing about you had one job. I think if you're gonna make a genre film like this, you really have one job. Like you have to establish the world sucks, right? I think they do a good job of that. And then from there, you have to make it hard for the good guys or the good guys to get out. I think they do a good job of that too. There's not a ton. I'm trying to think if there's not a ton to really deep dive into on this. For me, this is just a really fun movie that I think is like one of those ones that would surprise people if you had like a watch party and you put it on, if they could get past the Australian accents. I think there's a lot of fun in this movie.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like I said, I struggled with the first 40 minutes, but definitely had a better time in the second half. I think if if the film was more like sort of like if it was less about, if they didn't have like this turkey shoot plot and it was more about just escaping, then I probably wouldn't have liked it as much. So the fact that the filmmakers went balls to the walls for the second half, it made it a fun time and made it an overall good experience, because I don't think I would have had as much fun if they'd set the whole thing in the prison camp and it was just about them escaping from the camp or something. I don't think I would have enjoyed it near as much.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess that's one thing to mention too, just before we move on, the actual the people that are actually paying for this kill, I think all of them are sort of deliciously evil too. Like I think they're these great caricatures of evil.
Yeah. I knew there was something else I was supposed to bring up when I was watching this. And it's another film with a similar plot. And Bacurau, it reminded me a little bit of Bacurau as well.
Ooh.
With the way they have these kind of pulpy characters, who are involved with the hunting side of things. And I was watching it, and all I could think about was Bacurau the whole time. And I only just remembered it now when you brought up the villain characters.
It's funny because as soon as he was talking about it, I was thinking of the same movie. I didn't make the connection when I was watching the movie, but yeah.
This movie would have been awesome with Udo Kier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
I still think Bacurau is a better movie, but yeah, very similar vibe. If you liked Bacurau, then maybe give this one a watch, because it's a similar vibe.
This would be the B feature on a Bacurau showing.
For sure. For sure.
God, Bacurau is so good. It is really good. You're right. That's a great call out. Well, should we fast forward a few years?
Sounds good.
So let's see. Brian Trenchard-Smith, after Turkey Shoot, he went on to do a movie that he was very famous for called BMX Bandits, which I didn't think would be right for a double feature here, but supposedly is very good kids movie.
This is just so randomly brought it up. I'll need to double check this. Is that the movie that Bruce Willis's French girlfriend in Pulp Fiction is watching?
Oh, that's an interesting
That
question.
is that I've that's probably the most obscure question I've ever asked on this podcast. Uh, what is the movie that Fabian is watching in Pulp Fiction? I am certain it's BMX Bandits, and I have no reason to think it's BMX Bandits, but I think it is BMX Bandits. Let me
It's not
see.
listed on their wiki page as far as
No,
like.
it's not either. Maybe it's not. Okay, never mind.
I will
No,
do
it's.
some deep diving and see.
Uh, so that was 1982. Turkey Shoot came out, and then 1983 BMX Bandits. So at this point, Trenchard-Smith had quite a bit of clout. Got some money in '86. He got $3.5 million to make Dead End Drive-In, which is the movie we're going to talk about next. So Dead End Drive-In came out, and to your point, Adam, very much in response to some of the stuff that had been in the news, some of the economic problems that were happening in Australia at the time. He wanted to make a movie that he felt would be relevant for the youth. He said he was 35 when this came out, and he was already told he was too old to do music videos, which he really wanted to do, and he was sort of in a weird place in his career. But he saw that there was this angst coming up with teenagers, and funny enough, this movie kind of bombed in Australia until it found an audience with teenagers. So his instincts were right. Nobody got it from the producers and well, I guess the producers didn't get it, and the studios, whoever's going to distribute this to theaters, didn't understand the audience. So it was a bomb initially, but has had a long career on video and has been successful in the long run for him. But it's essentially another dystopian, kind of what he calls what if movies. And it's a movie about I guess society that has a lot of economic issues, and they can't really afford, there's no jobs for everybody. There's not enough jobs for everybody. And so one of the decisions they do to try to curb this is they bring anybody who's chronically unemployed or young into a drive-in theater and basically hold them there, or prisoners there. And the movie follows the journey of one young man who goes there against his will, not knowing about this, honestly just wanting to go see a movie, and his journey to escape and find his freedom. So I started with Adam last time. Zach, what did you think of Dead End Drive-In?
It's really interesting to kind of see what a few years, and I don't know what the budget on this one was. I didn't look it up, but it definitely seems quite a bit higher, and I think it pays off for it. Like the best way I can kind of describe it is it's kind of like The Warriors, but I like it better.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the sense that I don't know, like I like Walter Hill, but I feel like this works better with this director, like this idea, and the kind of like all this like I never know how to describe like The Warriors, where it's like it is sort of dystopian, but it's not. It's like this weird alternate history thing.
Yeah,
It's kind of hard
totally.
to describe. This kind of fits into that as well. And I don't know. I love the look of the film. I think I think the acting is probably worse than Turkey Shoot in some scenes. Like it's a little rough at times, though I don't, that might be intentional. But the overall look of the film is just great, and I really enjoy like everything that goes on in it and things like that. So it's a little bit easier to overlook. But yeah, overall, I think I liked it quite a bit.
Awesome.
It's
Adam?
kind of a copy paste from what Zach said for me, honestly. I definitely preferred this movie over Turkey Shoot. Nothing against Turkey Shoot in particular. I think this is just purely down to just having more money and more time to kind of figure out his own style. But I just think this film is just a much better made movie. Turkey Shoot, I just don't think there's anything that kind of jumps out stylistically when we talk about filmmaking, but I think this film is much more stylish. The camera work, the cinematography, the set design, everything is just a head and shoulders above everything in Turkey Shoot. And it's probably down to budget. You talked about Turkey Shoot has budget slashed, and it could have been a lot more stylish, but yeah, I just think this film is so much better made. It's a much more confident film. It seems like it's made by a filmmaker who knows exactly what he wants to say and how he wants to say it. I agree with Zach. A lot of the acting is quite suspect, especially from the lead character, who's probably like the most uncharismatic lead. For this kind of film, I would have preferred somebody who's maybe, and I guess the whole point of his character is that he's just kind of like a small regular dude. But I think I might have preferred somebody who was maybe a little bit of a better actor or maybe a little bit more charismatic or something. But overall, yeah, this is a really well made film. It's a lot of fun. It's great to look at. It's really stylish. The music's really good as well. I'm pretty sure the music was done by the same guy as the guy who did Turkey Shoot, who's funnily enough was called Brian May, but not the Brian May from Queen, because I googled that to make sure it wasn't the guitarist from Queen. But yeah, I think as I said, overall Dead End Drive-In, really solid film if you can get past the kind of shoddy acting by a lot of the actors.
Well, so funny enough, this one is barely on the They Shoot Pictures list. So it's all the way down at 14,059. It's not really anything noteworthy down there close to it.
I was gonna
Nightmare
ask,
on
is
Elm
there
Street.
anything kind of famous around there? So
Yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is right there.
that's so low. Nightmare on Elm Street
Uh-huh.
2 is great.
I agree.
I
It's
agree.
overhated.
Final Destination 2 is right there.
That's okay, I guess.
Purge Election Year, I haven't seen that one yet. The
That one's the
2016 one.
second best one in a pretty suspect franchise. Yeah, it's not
Right.
Anarchy, but it's okay.
And then some of the Bond movies, like Man with the Golden Gun, is down here.
Still never seen a Bond movie, so I definitely can't go.
That's crazy. You've never seen any James Bond movies, like not even like just on TV once when you were growing up.
No, no, I've never had any. Never seen them.
That's insane.
I feel like it's the kind of thing that you would like generally, Zach. I don't think there's anything too controversial about a Bond movie for you.
Yeah, they're just pretty pulpy. Especially like the ones from like the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. They're very much not intellectual. I can understand people not liking the newer ones, the Daniel Craig era ones, because they try to be like really gritty and down to earth and stuff. But like anything like the later Sean Connery and the Roger Moore era is just pretty schlocky and pulpy.
It's been on my list for a long time to watch. I've just never committed because it's what is there like 20 sub movies now? Like there's quite
Yeah,
a
but
few.
like you don't have to watch them in any particular. You can just like pick random ones.
Okay.
There's
Yeah,
no
I know
real
people talk about their
continuity.
favorite Bonds, and I think there's like one dude who just played it one time, and I'm like, that kind of interests me because he never came
Yeah,
back to do it.
That's actually one of the better ones.
George Lazenby on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which was a huge inspiration for the last sort of dream segment in Inception with the snow fortress. That was a huge influence on Christopher Nolan for that part. Yeah.
Yeah, on Her Majesty's Secret Service is probably a really interesting way to start because they tried to make it was the first time that they tried to make like a real movie, right? All the Bond movies up to that point had been um like very fun, kind of pulpy
Villain of the
spot.
week kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And then all of a sudden they hit with this like emotional resonance. He gets married. Like there's all this crazy stuff that happens in it where and then that he didn't I forget the reason why he didn't come back. They didn't offer him the role, I think. I think he wanted it. Or he wanted too much money. There's some reason he didn't come back, but they went in a totally
Yeah.
different direction. And
And
then
then
he got
Donald
both.
Pleasance is in one of them. Is he in the Connery ones?
He's in a few of them.
He's in a few of them. Yeah, he's like one of like the kind of recurring big bads that kind of shows up in the movies. But again, you don't really have to watch any of them in like a particular order. Like the only ones that kind of have a continuity are the Daniel Craig ones. If you're like you'd want to watch those ones in the order they released, because that's the first time also in like a James Bond where they kind of wanted to have like a cohesive story from film to film. But
Right.
like you could just pick a random Sean Connery. Like you could just sit down and watch Goldfinger and it won't matter at all. You don't have to have any prior knowledge, even though it's like the fourth Bond movie. Or the third, I think, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's the third or the fourth. But you could just sit down and watch that and it won't matter at all.
I got a little bit of a rise because I watched True Lies like earlier this year, late last year, and I put something about how I never need to watch a Bond movie because I'm just going to assume this is better. And I think I got a couple people offended, so I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say Bond definitely has its fans. Uh, I like the movies, but I wouldn't go out and defend them. There's a lot of misogyny that's just like very awkward at
Oh
this
yeah,
point in
they are
history.
very much products of their time. Very much products of their time.
But anyway,
Um,
we should probably talk about
Yeah.
sorry.
no, it's interesting, man. I mean, I think that's a good tangent. It's shocking to think about you. How many movies have you seen in theaters this year? And we can jump in.
Let's see. I can go to my letterbox real quick.
But
I have
roughly,
been
it's
to
like,
the theater 72 times.
geez, man.
I mean,
Like, and
some of those
that's
were to see older movies, but yeah, I mean, It's been quite a few. I go to the theater a lot.
Just the odds that you haven't been seen a Bond is just so high. But anyways, so Dead End Drive-In was made off of a short story called Crabs, who is the main character here. And Trenchard-Smith got it and said it needed more blood and mayhem. So he worked with the producers. He worked with Corman's production company, New World, and the local one was called Springville. But he worked with them to figure out kind of exactly how much nudity he needed. He was to make it kind of in the exploitation genre. So he was very calculated in where he put in violence and nudity to make sure it would fit. It's almost like the stories. Did you hear when Mike and Arno were talking about on the interview where when Hong Kong they used to make movies and they knew that if they wanted to sell it to like the Philippines, for example, they knew they were going to send them the first reel and like the third reel or something like that, and they were gonna watch those, and if it had either a star or a good action sequence, then they would buy it. They would just send a check for $1 million. So
That's
they're
awesome.
very, yeah. So they were very strategic about how they made like where they put certain scenes in. And he came off as very strategic in that sense as well. He kind of half apologized for having the nudity in it. He's like, I'm not going to defend that this movie needed it, but I wanted it to get picked up. Um, and uh, and the actors were okay with it.
Well, I mean, you
And
talk
they,
about Corman. I mean, that's exactly how he was with nudity. He had like a formula
yeah,
for how you can trick audiences into thinking your film has a ton of nudity in it
yeah,
when it really
Yeah, because
doesn't.
the nude scene in this film is actually really like artfully staged as well. Like the way like the sex scene is framed with like the car and stuff.
yeah,
It was actually really like well done. It was like actually like good filmmaking.
yeah. He was very proud of that. He said they worked with the
Yeah.
actor on that. The woman, her name was Natalie McCurry, just to see what she'd be comfortable with, because she didn't really want to do like a full-on sex scene. So they kind of showed her that idea, and she was okay with it. Um,
Cool. I like
but
that.
yeah, no, I agree. And then there's the shower sequence as well, but that's more just standard. That just feels like something straight out of a Corman recommendation. Um, but yeah, I okay. So let's see. This movie for me, I saw it. Let's say 2 years ago or something for the first time. Uh, and I love it. Um, I think it's, I love these movies that are obviously made for, um, I hate to say the youth, but nothing makes me sound like an 80-year-old man. But like, I love these movies that have a very like youthful spirit to them, and they're made for, like a younger generation to kind of, it's in the middle of this like anti-establishment phase. And I think he nails that a lot. A lot of the decisions he makes, like, even small things like, when they go to the counter to get food, the only items are available are junk food, right? Which is something that kids want, but it's played against that, right? To where now, if it's the only thing you can have, it's like torture all of a sudden, right? Because nobody just wants milkshakes for every meal, um, or just hamburgers and milkshakes for every meal. Or if you do, like, what a terrible situation where now, in exchange for that, you're basically a prisoner and you have to sleep in your car and live in this world, right? There's a theme of drugs that are being run in, which I think he was saying is very intentional. So there's, just like in the US, the CIA has been a part of the drug trade or whatever. That's the theory. Um, I don't know if it's been actually proven. I don't know, Zach, it feels like that's something you would have researched. Is it at conspiracy theory level, or is it pretty standard truth at this point that the CIA is like the biggest drug runners?
I mean, there's definitely like to say like yes, this is confirmed through like statistical numbers. I don't know if that can be like established, but to sit there and say they played a major hand in lots of availability of drugs and things like that, I mean that's pretty much been declassified to certain extents. At least nothing recent, but a lot of the stuff from like the 70s and 80s and kind of their sketch practices and things have definitely been that's out of conspiracy theory territory now.
which is pretty fucked up.
Yeah, like it's a lot. Talk about LSD and things like that.
It's crazy to think we have a war on drugs. But anyways, that's a separate topic. But I think that undercurrent kind of storyline, I think, gives the story some depth here. And then there's another storyline that gives this movie some depth, which is the whole immigration piece that he introduces kind of near the end, right? So he layers on. I think it's interesting to watch this movie as an American because although we don't have an issue with immigration of people coming from Southeast Asia into Australia, there's an obvious parallel. A lot of immigration discussion going on right now, and has been for the last ever since this movie was made in '86. That's been a constant point of discussion. And so I think it's, his movie is able to be timeless because I think of the way that he introduces these elements that are kind of there. They're not the point of the story. Like this is just a fun escapist movie about this guy, breaking out of prison or whatever, breaking out of this kind of prison. But I think the fact that he adds these elements in makes it good on rewatch and makes it interesting.
So what you're saying is this movie is like you're taking a director who may have more to say than meets the eye for the most part. But on this film, he made something that was more pretty obvious on like the political things, but still tried to make it fun. So what you're saying is this is basically John Carpenter's They Live.
Ooh, I like that.
It did give me Carpenter vibes, funnily enough, that you bring up Carpenter. Some of the stuff did give me Carpenter vibes. Like a lot of the stuff where, especially like the car, when they're sort of driving around cars and stuff, I was just getting like Christine vibes. Maybe it's just because he's driving an old car.
There's
Obviously,
definitely a
Christine's an
Plymouth in
old
there, I think.
car.
I swear there's a
Yeah,
Plymouth Fury in the film.
yeah. So it's funny you should bring Carpenter into it because I did kind of get Carpentery vibes at some point. But I agree from when mentioning about the sort of underlying themes that happen in the movie. Like we said, it's not really about the drugs trade or about immigration or whatever. It's about a bunch of kids who are locked up and try to escape and what have you. And some of them trying to give up trying to escape and just kind of accept their fate or whatever. But there definitely is these kind of universal themes that are brought in that even now and whatever kind of country you're in are still relevant. Like you said, the stuff with the Southeast Asia coming into Australia obviously seems to be a big thing. Obviously that parallels with the US with like a lot of immigrants coming in from like Mexico. And even like me in Ireland here, we've had like Ireland has brought in a lot of Ukrainian refugees in the last year since the war's been going on. And there's a lot of sort of racially motivated, or well, not racially, I suppose, more xenophobically motivated hate towards these people who are just trying to, find a better life for themselves after their country was torn apart. And it's really sad. A lot of stuff that's happening in Ireland in the last year. There's a lot of right wing, sort of extreme right wing ideology coming into society. It's kind of seeping in from your side of the pond. Thanks, guys. But it's as you said, it's kind of whether it's me in Ireland or you in the US or someone in Australia in the 80s watching this movie, it's a theme that's kind of universally relevant, which makes it easier to become connected to the film. Because we talked about this when we talked about the rules of the game and how all the thematic stuff is only relevant to rich people or poor people, or it's relevant to people in 1930s France, and it makes it difficult for people in modern times maybe connected to this movie because a lot of the themes are just not relevant to us. Whereas when you have a film like this, like I would argue, and this is maybe the craziest thing I've ever said in this podcast, I would argue that this random exploitation film does a better job of creating a film that's timeless than Jean Renoir did. So yeah,
I will second you on that. Don't worry.
I mean, sometimes it's easier to take medicine if it's sweet, right? Even Mary Poppins said that. Like sometimes these issues and these themes, it's it's almost easier to digest if it's presented in a way that's more fun to watch, right? So I think this is one of my favorite arguments for the value of exploitation movies in general, is you get to, because you have this sort of very tight confines of what it needs to be. Like it needs to have a body count and it needs to have nudity and it needs to have these things. From there, you have freedom to do kind of whatever you want, right? So occasionally you get like the Takashi Miikes of the world that are making these super interesting movies about like organ harvesting or all this crazy stuff um, that are under, but he's working within kind of a formula of how to get it sold, right?
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of like I'm guessing you haven't, Adam, but Chris, have you seen Southern Comfort, Walter Hill?
No, you know what? I haven't, but I do want to see that.
Yeah, so the one thing I really liked about that one, and it kind of goes into what you're saying, is the whole thing is like, just to kind of get a little context, it's about the soldiers who were training for the military and they're having to do their basic in essentially like Louisiana swamp. And the whole movie ends up just being an allegory for, the Vietnam War and, um, because there's a huge misunderstanding of what happens and like innocent people end up dying because of the way they look and things like that. It's a whole allegory for it. But you never have to look at the movie that way. And I think that's what makes it a lot easier to, like you say, have fun with and a lot easier to swallow. And then, the
Yeah.
more you enjoy the movie, the more you're going to think about it and say, okay, this came out during this time. And because it hits so close to home, if you're in the US, it's Louisiana, you're able to make those necessary connections more than someone just showing you, here's how shit the Vietnam War was. Because we know that. Like we know that.
Right,
But
right,
it's
right.
hard to connect with that.
I love it. Um, yeah, I'll need to see Southern Comfort then. I didn't realize that what it was about. I just saw that it was a Walter Hill movie.
And it has Fred Ward in it, so that's always worth seeing.
Ah, that's great. Yeah, he's an underrated actor for sure. He's awesome. What was Miami Blues recently we saw
Hmm.
with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so good. Well, what else? What else on Dead End Drive-In? I mean, I think the only other thing I wanted to bring up was he talks about in the commentary the guy who plays Haza, the very tall, lanky guy who gets into a fight with the main character.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um, he's obviously a very kind of bad actor, but he was a famous Australian personality at the time. He had like a Saturday night show where they would show music videos and it was a very popular show. And so it was kind of it was this weird thing where it was like a big honor to get him to say yes to be in the movie. And so he said he gave him no direction. He just let him be himself. That's basically how he was in real life.
So how successful was this? This seems like the perfect movie of someone who had a lot of minor successes and they gave him a little bit more of a budget. He made a passion project and it died. Is that kind of accurate to what happened here?
Unfortunately, at least in Australia, it did not hit. Yeah, they
Yeah.
marketed it wrong. But then it caught on an audience in outside of Australia. And he said, the biggest critique of the movie from both critics and I guess the public in Australia was the immigration stuff because there was not a lot of open dialogue about racism in 1986 in Australia. And so it made people uncomfortable. Like, why did you bring this in? And he defended the position. He basically didn't back down. He said, well, it's important to take a look at this stuff. Um, and he got a lot of flack for it and a lot of hate for it in Australia. But he said when it played in the US, it actually people immediately got it and they were like, ah, shit.
Yeah, and
Um,
did he have much of? I don't know. I didn't know anything about this director. First time I've seen any of his stuff or really heard of him. Did he do much after this? Like, or
well,
was this
funny
kind of?
enough, so he moved to the US and he's been directing um, uh, franchise sequels and
Oh, you
stuff
mentioned
now.
Leprechaun 4. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. So he's been Leprechaun 3 and 4, Night of the Demons 2. He did a Megiddo or Megiddo or whatever movie. The
I think you
Omega
could say a
Code.
Medea movie. I was like, oof, that I'm sorry.
No, you know what I'm talking about? The Bible books, the Megiddo or whatever,
Yeah, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
the Omega Code. He did one of those. He did yeah. So he's sort of been around working in Hollywood as a for hire director ever since this. He did two movies that I really want to see that got a release recently from Vinegar Syndrome, maybe? Day of the Panther and Strike of the Panther.
I
Um,
think that was Vinegar. Yeah, that sounds right.
so anyways, he's getting discovered a little bit more in terms of video releases now. But yeah, I don't have too much else to say. I think I really love this movie. Um, I like it more than Turkey Shoot. I don't know how this movie's ranked 14,000 and the other one is ranked 8,000. The only thing I can think of is, to your point, Zach, it's just not as available on streaming and stuff. It's harder to
Yeah, I
see.
think Arrow put this out in the UK.
Hmm.
I don't know if they did a US disc though. I'm not
Yeah, they
sure
did.
about that.
They
They
did.
did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm looking at it. It
For
really
those
leaned
listening who didn't get to watch this, like I watched both of these in HD on YouTube, so like they're available both to watch on YouTube really, really easily. You know, they're both just there. You can just search the name of the film. They're there full HD. So yeah, if they are hard to watch as they seem to be from like normal sources, just like they're both available in HD on YouTube. That's how I watched both of them.
And according to what I saw today, which was funny that you picked this for us to do today. Today's the 24th for anybody curious who's listening. Um, Tubi is putting it on it's going to be on Tubi, I think, sometime today. I think is what when I was looking at it earlier, it said coming today for streaming.
Well,
So
this is I feel like it's worth mentioning. This is one of Quentin Tarantino's quote unquote favorite directors. So
that
there's
doesn't
no,
necessarily
Right.
surprise me.
yeah,
Seems about right. Yeah.
yeah. So we've done in the film club, we did Lady Snowblood, and now we've done these. So maybe we're accidentally doing films that influenced Quentin Tarantino as a theme here. Um,
We
but
also did hardcore in the film club, and that film was mentioned a lot in his sort of semi biography cinema speculation.
ooh, okay, good to know. Yeah, I have that book. I haven't gone through it yet. Any final thoughts on Dead End Drive-In before we move on to the exciting adventures that await us in the next few weeks?
No, I think I'm good.
I think I'm good.
So what's in store for us, gentlemen?
All right.
Uh,
So me and Adam have gotten the privilege to get the October picks
mhm.
for the month. So for the first set, we'll be doing Scream 1 through 3, which we'll be talking about on my week. And if Adam, if you'd like to announce what yours are, even if you feel they're obvious, you may do so.
Unsurprisingly, for my week, we're going to be watching Scream 4, 5, and 6. So we're going to cover the whole Scream franchise in October, which I cannot wait for because I'm going to be watching them anyway. So it just made sense because Chris believes he's only seen one. So,
Have you seen any Scream movies, Adam?
oh, I'm a complete noob, complete
Okay.
Scream noob. As regular listeners know, I barely even know what they're about. Yeah, so we're gonna watch all 6 Scream movies in the next few weeks. I'm super excited to talk about them because I love them so much. We're also planning, it's not been confirmed yet, so don't hold us to us. We're hoping to have for the first time ever on like a discussion episode. We're planning on have a special guest with us. Won't name any names just yet because we're still waiting for final confirmation, but we do plan on having a special guest with us for the first time ever for like a discussion episode. Normally we save our guests for Chris's amazing interviews that he does with us, every odd week. But yeah, we're hoping to have a special guest with us for these next 2 discussion episodes. So fingers crossed everything works out there with our calendars. But it's going to be fun. I really cannot wait.
And just so people can watch along, this episode that we're recording today is going to drop on the 29th, right? That's when people are going to hear this?
Yes.
More than likely on the 29th or the 6th, just depending on how things fall. So it's going to be, you're gonna have plenty of time to watch the films in advance if you've never seen the Scream films for whatever ludicrous reason.
Well, that's what I was going to ask about. So if people wanted to watch along, and so if this episode drops on, no, excuse me, this episode is going to drop on the 6th of October. That's right.
Mhm.
So that means that Scream 1 through 3 is going to be on the 20th,
Mhm.
and Screams 4 through 6 are going to be technically on November 3rd. So
Maybe we post it on Halloween though, if we can. That'd be cool.
We'll figure this all off
Yeah.
recording, but you'll have, as long as you have, you're gonna have plenty of time to watch all 6 in advance
Yeah,
if you want to do that. Yeah,
that's the only reason I bring it up. So you have basically, I'm just kind of saying you have the month of October to see all 6 Scream films, which feels very reasonable.
for sure.
And Chris, I'm just curious. I think you mentioned earlier you had seen like 2 of them. Which Scream movies have you seen?
Yeah, for sure. I've seen the first one.
Okay.
And I thought it was fine. I'm curious to revisit it. It's probably been 20 years. And I think I've seen like half of the second one or something. I don't want to indicate that I have no interest in it or anything like that. It's not that. It just never was a priority, I guess, for me. They seemed kind of campy and silly and stuff, which I mean I love, but didn't make it like rise to the top of my watch list. So I'm excited for this. Y'all love them so much and defend them so much. I'm excited to be forced to watch them so I can get an opinion on them.
And you can then explain and agree with me of why Scream 4 is the best sequel in the franchise. We'll just leave it there.
Well, you know me, I do love my sequels, so I would not be surprised if something like that happens. Would it be worth teasing some of the interviews we have coming up, or should we let that be a surprise?
Sure. If you have them if you have them sort of ready and you know for sure they're happening, yeah.
Okay, so I wanna the one I know for sure is gonna be one I'm very, very geeked about. It's gonna be our first episode with an animator. So we have an interview coming up with Colleen Kazan. He's the filmmaker and animator that has been the Deaf Crocodile's been putting out. A lot of his work from Romania. So we're gonna have a discussion with an animator, which will be, I think that'll lead to a whole bunch of discussions that we've just never had before, which I'm very interested in. And then I just got an email about an hour before we started recording that Shahram Mokri has said yes,
Sweet.
which I am so excited about. This is one of these God tier directors for me, as y'all might know. So there's some quirks there about how he wants to record, given his limited English, which I don't even care. The fact that he's even willing to do it is just mind blowing. And he says he's working on his next film, which is also extremely exciting. So I don't know exactly when that one's coming out, but then we have a couple of label interviews, which I'll wait to introduce. But yeah, it's gonna be a fun end of the year. I'm very happy. We set out a goal, as y'all both know, to try to get more filmmakers this year, and it took a little while, but it's starting to happen now. If anybody hasn't heard the one with Luca Balzer, I think that interview is super interesting. Just even at the base level of just his connections in New York, it's amazing to think of a kid who's already worked with Martin Scorsese and the Safdie brothers before he turns 30. Like what an amazing experience to start your career that way. And now he's got his first movie coming out through Circle Collective, one of the partner labels. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. We'll wrap up there, guys. As we said, plenty of time to watch Scream movies and keep an eye out for all the upcoming episodes as usual. And for now, I think we'll wrap up.
So.
See ya.